Alrighty, so I just want to do a quick recap. Let's jump straight into it. This is end of August. We're obviously September 1st today. But I just wanted to point out a couple of things that I've been collecting, talking with other counselors, working with students themselves actually letting me know. So I've realized the following, I think, are the standouts for me. Harvard prompts reduced from 200 words to 150 words, and question number two was changed. MIT admit data. I think I listened to an All In podcast talk about this. I thought that was an interesting take on it. UCLA admit rate data I recently ran into and I thought was really interesting. We'll talk about the ED2 updates, the ones at least that I have come across with my students and consider to be particularly notable, and then a couple of reminders about harvesting essays and things like that. So let's jump straight into it. Firstly, Harvard prompt change from 200 words to 150. So you have to be way more efficient. You know, it reminds me of the old school days when they had 1,000 character counts. So that was roughly 100 words. You're just going to have to get to the point much quicker. You're going to have to be, I don't know if you can entertain a narrative flowy thing. I'm sure some students will be able to pull it off, but you have to be super efficient with it. I think like within the first two or three, the second or third sentence, you're starting with you're giving me an I statement or something. But yeah, 150 words is pretty short. Question number two changed. I thought this was interesting. Last year, it was briefly describe an intellectual experience that was important to you. And then this year, they switched it to describe a time when you strongly disagreed with someone about an idea or issue. How did you communicate or engage with this person? What did you learn from this experience? So this kind of reminds me of medical school application essays, interview questions. I think by removing the intellectual experience and focusing more on like intrapersonal experience, especially conflict, strongly disagree. Um, I think this is going to be tough to not be generic about. Um, yeah, I would have to pull from do other colleges have this prompt? I tried looking. I was looking through like the top 20 schools and I couldn't find a school that specifically had this prompt in it. So I think I'm getting this from like more graduate school applications. I could be wrong. If you guys know where a college application, if there's a prompt like this there, go ahead and post it in the comments. But uh, I think this is going to be very interesting. I think this is going to separate. I guess like I'm curious how I'm still trying to formulate how I'm going to help coach this. Um, you'd have to begin with the right kind of conflict, right kind of disagreement. If the disagreement is too vapid, or if it's too shallow, or if it's too one-sided, then there's an issue there. So you got to find something that's particularly revealing or particularly challenging. And I think a lot of students will struggle there. That's like the first 50% of students that you'll have to beat. You will beat if you just have a more interesting disagreement that you had. The second is how did you communicate or engage with this person? So you can be immediately very generic, like, and so I did active listening, and then I could totally see students doing that, like saying what you think they want you to say rather than being honest and emotional about it. Like the first time I disagreed, I had admittedly a very emotional reaction because naturally I felt so kind of affronted by that notion. So I think like how you express and communicate or express the communication aspect is where you're going to separate the next maybe 25% of students. So if you just work on those two things, you have a top 25% essay is what I would generally think. And what did you learn from this experience? Obviously the takeaway. This is going to be fun. This is going to be challenging, especially to students that struggle to come up with ideas that frankly lived very vanilla experiences and never put themselves out there or meandered. My favorite video to teach something like this is probably it's a YouTube short from Jang, I believe, in New York, and he interviews this random trucker hat guy, and he talks about how he has a controversial opinion that racists need love. It's a very, very nice story. I think that's probably the example that I would show to students to get them to understand like a more, I guess, like more interesting way of answering this prompt. Spending too much time on this. MIT admit rate news. So I'm not gonna, I was thinking I'm not gonna touch this with a 10-foot pole, but considering how the reactions and people's opinions can be about this, but I guess I want to just analyze this objectively. African American dropped by 10% from 15% to 5. Asians went up by 7%. And I remember I actually did the math on this, but now I forgot. Let's take a look. So we're going to look up MIT admission data. So class of 2028, it was a 4.5 admit rate, and 1,284 students were admitted. So if you do 1284 times, well, it used to be, I'm not really doing really good math here, guys, but I wager that it's like 40 more students, 40 to 60 more students. Oof, I shouldn't be doing math while I'm recording. Well, either way, that's enough for me to be, really intrigued by this. I'm curious about what the next year will entail. Hispanics, Latino dropped by 5% from 16 to 11. Why is this happening? I think MIT reinstating the SAT to try to set new measures for, I would say, like having a cutoff, I suppose. Like I think MIT, if you have really good SAT scores, ACT scores, along with the more conventional aspects of an MIT successful applicant, which is like, American AIME or academic competitions, really high level research, summer programs. I have a video posted prior. Their summer programs, some of them directly hosted by MIT. Yeah, I'm more bullish for students who have stronger academics and test scores applying to MIT this year. They're early action, one of the top early actions, so you could stack that with like early decision to Columbia, early decision to UPenn. So this is good news for a lot of students who scored high on their SAT, I believe, or ACT. UCLA admit data, I just was taking a look. You just Google UCLA admission data or admission statistics, and you'll see this. And I found a couple of interesting things. Take a look at this, guys. The UCLA median unweighted GPA, unweighted, pure A, B, C, D, F, was 4.0. Basically, the median was a straight A student from, that's kind of crazy to me. A 3.95 to a 4.0 is the 25th percentile, the 75th percentile. The weighted is insane. A lot of parents and students are kind of obsess over calculating the GPA, and honestly, I don't spend that much time calculating GPA, because at the end of the day, you can just simply see like the rank of the student, and then you can balance that with the unweighted GPA. You could look at their 10th grade, 11th grade, perhaps even 9th grade to see what kind of weighted courses they took. So I see, and I work with a lot of people who will be like 4.4 versus 4.45 versus 4.6, and frankly, I think the numbers don't really, I think there's too much of a focus on calculating the numbers rather than assessing it as a whole. Maybe that doesn't make too much sense to others, but that's my thought there. In terms of the more specific by college, take a look at this. The arts and science, or the letters and science, the college is 11%. So this is where you're going to have a lot of major choices for pre-med students, because you have bio, you have biochemistry, you have the life sciences, you have applied math, you have all these other kinds of things that beyond just the engineering. I think that's the big separator. Look at engineering. This is 4.9%. So instead of doing, let's say, computer science or electrical engineering for some engineering schools, if they have data science in, let's say, the college or the letters and science department, that is something that you should be thinking about, because in the long run, especially if you're thinking about graduate school, there's so much like interchangeability there. But look at nursing. Woo! Those who are applying to UCLA nursing, I salute you. Good luck. Godspeed. Let's see what else I've got. ED2 update. So Rice added ED2 and CMU removed ED2. So that's really interesting for a lot of my STEM students. Particularly, let's begin with like removing CMU. CMU was a great, like a solid tier 1, tier 2 student maybe they're competing for S tier, they know they're reaching, and so they'll try using early decision one or early restrictive early action to reach, and then use CMU ED2 as a backup. But now that is gone. And so I feel like there's going to be kind of, you have to redirect the flow of what would typically have applied to CMU ED2. Those are still very competitive, very appealing engineering inclined, STEM inclined students. So I'm curious if Rice is going to have this huge, kind of uptick. Maybe their yield rate won't necessarily be as high relative to the jump in applicant numbers, but nonetheless, the applicant numbers are going to be, I think, pretty high this year for Rice because they're making the shift and adding that while CMU is removing it. So I thought that was really interesting because they're kind of in the range of tier 1, tier 1.5. So they definitely have overlap for my STEM students when I'm having this discussion with them about the college list and their early strategy. It reminds me of Northeastern. Northeastern, one year, I think several years back, switched over to early action, early decision one, early decision two, and then add on top of that, you know, the fuel to the fire that was added is that there's no essay requirement. And so there's the year where they had this explosive news where they had like a 7% admit rate. But when upon closer inspection, you realize that just everyone applied to it. So this engineering of, I guess, like popularity of demand, using ED2s, using the different types of early applications. USC was also really clever about this too. I actually have to look up if they've made any adjustments since last year. But USC was an early action school and it's private, and normally that conflicts with restrictive early action programs. But last year, USC put early action and forced students to apply to early action if they were interested in doing merit scholarship. And so then other schools then who are restrictive early action that would normally bar it had to capitulate and say, oh, okay, for USC, because you're trying to get a scholarship, we'll allow you to apply early action while you also apply restrictive early action with us. So that was really clever, I thought. I don't know if that was intentional, and I'm not sure if other colleges are going to be reactive to it. So I've been looking into things like that. Anyways, for students, my advice has been for my students, you need to be harvesting. This is the time of harvest. I know school is starting, but you want to get your deadlines figured out. You want to get your major choices figured out and put into the application so that you can properly harvest the prompts. This is an example, something you want to try going for. You want to have your major choices selected not from looking up the college website anymore. The applications are out. Go directly to the applications. And the reason why is because the websites are not always accurate. What you may see on the website won't show up as an option on the application, and ultimately it's the application that'll matter. But tracking your deadlines, interviews, you might want to get, your antenna should start kind of coming up for the interview process. So I had posted this last year. If you're interested, I think I posted it somewhere. But you want to start thinking about interviews. Yeah, that's about it. Am I missing anything else? Be careful about your deadlines. I think I've seen students. I've seen students make like multiple. All three of these I've run into issues. Like for example, deadlines. I've had students put in the wrong, like look up the wrong deadlines because they didn't realize a portfolio requirement had an advanced deadline for like musicians, etc. I've seen students look for a major choice that they saw and were convinced was there, and it's on the website, but it's not on the application. So again, the application is what's going to be the final word. And then I've seen students harvest the wrong prompts. They say, oh, yeah, I got it all. And they made the mistake of just immediately adding it and then going and looking for the essays. I explain to my students all the time that sometimes the application is sequential, meaning what you fill out in a previous row will then change or alter the questions that are asked in the subsequent row. And so I think the main triggers are your start term or application type, like whether you're applying early action, regular. Sometimes that changes what major choices are available, like at USC, and then what major you choose. I think those two things I would always want to input before I start looking for essays. But yeah, I hope this was helpful. I'm moving on. I'll try to be more in depth about some of the things you want to maybe take a look at if you're interested. Just um, send me some feedback, and let's see if I have time to maybe go in more detail about some of these thoughts. Alrighty, guys. I'll see you guys later.